All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick will be doing our NFL Mock Draft 2.0, our first two-round mock of the cycle. We'll be breaking these picks down in 5 to 10 pick increments. So if you'd like to skip around a little bit, that's the format of this video. Number one overall, Nick, I did make a prediction in the offseason the Falcons would end up with a number one overall pick or that of Justin Fields. And Chicago's in such a unique situation. Any other year, Justin Fields would be the quarterback for the future, unquestionably. But here you have a chance to reset your quarterback contract window and potentially upgrade at the position at the same time. Seems like a no-brainer at this moment. The Caleb Williams will be a Chicago Bear. Ryan Poles pulled off a phenomenal trade last year when the Panthers moved up for Bryce Young. That resulted in them getting the number one pick once again. Is this the right move, Nick? Do you think they should look to trade out of this position? It seems like it's going to take a lot of capital to get that. But it seems like all the factors I'm mentioning right here are a perfect reason for why they should take Williams. Again, an incredibly unique situation.
In my opinion, this is the most fascinating story in sports right now, what the Chicago Bears can do with this number one overall pick that they have. I think Justin Fields is a great quarterback. I think the team is in a great position right now. The defense was phenomenal this year. They had an incredible second half of the season. They added some nice weapons last year by getting DJ Moore, in addition to getting that first overall pick when they traded out of the spot and gave it to the Panthers. So I think they are a weapon or two away from being competitive in what is a very tough NFC North, but overall a pretty weak NFC compared to the AFC, in my opinion, based off the raw talent of some of these teams. I think if I was, in charge, if I was the GM in Chicago right now, I would trade back and take what really was going to be, what most likely is going to be a king's ransom. You can get a first-round pick next year, a first-round pick this year, probably 2 seconds, and a really good player to add for that. I think Justin Fields showed a lot of progress this year. I think he got better as the season went on. I think he is a quarterback that's still very talented, has a lot of raw talent and untapped potential. Of course, the contract, makes a lot of sense, right? That conversation is an interesting conversation. It makes a lot of sense that you reset your contract, obviously, and you get a guy in Caleb Williams who has all the raw talent in the world. We certainly know that. He's a very talented quarterback, a great player that would fit pretty well in this offense, I think. If I'm in charge, I'm certainly taking the draft cap because I think this Bears team is a piece or two away from being competitive in the NFC. I think they could really turn around if they get another wide receiver who's really talented, plug in a nice piece or two on the offensive line. This team could definitely be very competitive. So I personally would trade back and take the capital, but I also understand taking Caleb Williams here. He is a very good quarterback at number one.
Elite level improviser, phenomenal arm strength and velocity. Really good decision maker with some calm feet in the pocket under pressure. A lot of, Patrick Mahomes comparisons. Look at the rest of this top five. Obviously Drake May for Washington at number 2. I think that'd be a great pick for them. Sam Howell, at times looked like he might be the guy that could build around. But, he had, 21 interceptions at a pick in 7-8 straight games at the end of the year. Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 3 to New England. A lot of talk of what could happen here. Maybe the Patriots are a team that looks to move up. But I think they need to go ahead and try to build out this receiving room, address quarterback and free agency, and kind of, look for a bridge type of guy. Maybe bring Jimmy G back. Joe Alt, number 4 to Arizona, I think would be a great pick. The team that's probably quietly going to have a very good draft with the selections they have. A bookend left tackle there. And then Brock Bowers. I've seen this guy going from anywhere from 5 all the way down to, 18 to Cincinnati. We're going to stick with 5. You've seen what Jim Harbaugh just did at Michigan. He knows all about the tight end position. And Brock Bowers, certainly he's not the greatest in terms of blocking or being a physical blocker in that aspect, kind of like what they had at Michigan. But this guy's a phenomenal player downfield. I think Harbaugh would love to get his quarterback, Justin Herbert, a guy like this. Do you think that these pass catchers are overdrafted? And what do you think about the fits?
I think this is a very talented pass catcher class, and a lot of teams need these sort of pass catchers. Bowers and Harrison going in the top 5 makes a lot of sense for me. Both of them would fit well at the picks that we slotted them. I think Bowers is a very unique pick for for Los Angeles with the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh's there. He has this star quarterback already. A lot of the times it's tough to find that quarterback, but he already has that piece. He has his incredibly talented quarterback in Justin Herbert. Now just give him the weapons and build around him. This team could be very successful despite their cap constraints. I think the most interesting pick here is the Cardinals, Joe Alt at 4. I don't think people realize the Cardinals are a lot closer to being competitive than we think. We've been making fun of the Cardinals because they had a bad GM and a bad coaching situation with Kingsbury, but they got a new regime in there in the team. They made a lot of progress. They were they lost a lot of games this year, but they were very competitive. They put a lot of fight on the field. They fought for the last minute pretty much every single week, and they have Kyler Murray, who they already paid. I know Murray's not the most incredible quarterback and not living up to the hype, but he's still a very serviceable starter. If you plug in a guy like Alt, and they also have a pick at 27 we'll get to later, they could turn around their fortunes very quickly in the NFC.
Yeah, Kyler Murray is still a phenomenal talent. Certainly needs to show some more work ethic, and they need to help him out with some weapons and whatnot. And Joe Welt's a good, start doing that. Looking at 6 through 10, the Penn State tackle Ulu Fashanu. This guy isn't the greatest run blocker, but he is a phenomenal pass protector, and that's what the Giants need. Daniel Jones certainly needs some help, and it needs to start up front. They've had a lot of issues, the Giants, with their O-line, a guy who really anchors well in pass pro with a high-end motor. I think that'd be the fit for them. They need to skip quarterback in this draft and go offensive line. Malik Neighbors, getting a nice pass catcher for Tennessee. Will Levis seems like a very optimal selection. Jared Verse, I went with him at 8 here. I think that the Falcons need to continue to build up their edge depth. This is a guy who has great flexibility and incredibly explosive first step. He's also a player of a high motor, I think. He might be maybe a little reach compared to some of the other mocks. I think this would be a good fit for Atlanta. And Nick, you went with Rome Odunze from Washington with the Bears' 9th overall selection. We go Caleb Williams at number 1. A lot of things you can do here. Wide receiver, getting him a weapon seems like the right step in the direction. Like you alluded to earlier, the defense was really impressive in this offense. They could be a completely different image of what they were a season ago if they go these 2 selections.
Jazeer Newton is certainly a player I would consider at 9 if I am the Bears, but I think adding a weapon in Odunze is a really great add for this team. I already said it just a couple minutes ago. I think the Bears are in a great position to be competitive very quickly. Why not add another great weapon? DJ Moeller and Cole Kmet were very solid in their first years for the team. Both of them looked really good. You can now add in another guy in Odunze who has a high ceiling, a nice speed, a good player, looked really great at Washington. Add him in there. If you do take Caleb Williams, you want to give him weapons to throw to. If you're going to rock with Fields, give Fields another weapon, give him the possibility. I like that pick a lot at number 9.
And at 10, Talise Fuaga, a big fan of his, an incredibly physical run blocker. He was the best in college football this past year, right tackle. Nice addition there for the Jets, who really struggled to do anything on that side of the ball when Rodgers, obviously didn't play all year long. It was just a disaster for them. Looking at the back half of the first half of the first round, like you just alluded to, Jerron Newton, incredibly powerful interior defensive lineman for the Vikings, who have a lot of needs. The Broncos looking to corner, to pair somebody up with Patrick Surtain. Jaden Daniels looks like he'll be the future quarterback for the Raiders, another team who has an interesting, kind of thing going on with their roster. Antonio Pierce, be interesting to see who he's targeting. But right now it seems like Jaden Daniels will be the optimal fit for them. And then a trio of Alabama players to round things out with the Saints, Colts, and the Seahawks. Who do you think's the most talented out of those 3 tied players, Nick? And then, of course, the Raiders, again, getting a quarterback. Would that be the right decision?
I think the Raiders going for a quarterback could make sense. I think they do like what they have in Aiden O'Connell. I think he's a good, stopgap quarterback, a serviceable guy for now. New head coach Antonio Pierce. You would think that he would potentially consider trying to convince the GM to go defensive side of the ball, but I thought the Raiders defense was good, especially the second half of the season, so they showed some improvement, and the offense also showed some improvement as well in the second half of the season. I think the Raiders are another team that they are just a couple moves away from being competitive in a tough division with the Chiefs right there for them. I think, when you look at these Alabama guys, I got to go with Dallas Turner as the most talented. Him going to the Seahawks at 16 makes a lot of sense. This is a team that, could use help defensively. Obviously, a new coach, new setup going up there in the Pacific Northwest with Pete Carroll. Finally, his reign ending after a very successful with a Super Bowl win and some other appearances as well for the Seahawks. I like Dallas Turner a lot there. I've always liked him at Alabama. People were interested to see what he could do with Will Anderson gone out of that shadow. Had a really good season for the Tide. He slots in there perfectly. I think Terrion Arnold, though, is a really great corner as well. Part of that great duo of Kool-Aid McKinstry. J.C. Latham, underrated tackle in my opinion as well. Looked really good on this Alabama offensive line, protecting Jalen Milroe. Looked very sturdy in pass block this year.
You look at the back half of this first round, a lot of really good picks here. At 19, the Rams getting a good ball hawk at corner. He's got phenomenal ball skills. I think Troy Fatanu to the Steelers, a versatile lineman, really good for Arthur Smith's physical run game. Byron Murphy, looks like Christian Wilkins is departing. You slot in a physical interior defensive lineman there who's a gap clogger. I think that'd be a good fit there. You look at some of these playoff teams, Nick, especially at the pass-catching position, Brian Thomas, a guy who has good size, 6'4", 205. He also has pretty good top-end speed. How fun would he be in Houston? I think that'd be a heck of a fit. Buffalo, Troy Franklin, he's also a bit of a burner, a more physical pass catcher, and Xavier Legette, who's also a phenomenal athlete. And then the Chiefs getting Ladd McConkey, a guy who separates very well with some phenomenal route running. When you have an incredibly elite, accurate quarterback like Mahomes, that could be a match made in heaven. I think all these teams would be in for a pretty good score at wide receiver.
I think this is a really interesting class in terms of wide receivers. I think look at the Chiefs here. The biggest knock on the Chiefs this season was, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have any pass catchers. You look at the wide receiver room, he's working with guys that were super flawed. That and the offensive line had some issues, but if they can win the Super Bowl with a flawed wide receiver room and a poor offensive line, if they can plug in some talented wide receivers, the sky's the limit for the Chiefs. A three-peat certainly on the table. The Chiefs have really knocked their drafting out of the park the last couple of years. Trent McDuffie, probably the best player on the field individual performance-wise, and besides Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, in my opinion, the best defensive piece for the Chiefs in that game, as well as George Karlaftis. He had a fumble recovery. He looked really good in that game, another draft pick in recent years. So they have been able to put together a really good roster with drafted players. You saw Rashee Rice as well be involved for the Chiefs. So certainly another potentially great pick for the Chiefs with Ladd McConkey here. I think he would be a great fit. And Patrick Mahomes would love to have the extra help at wide receiver. Brian Thomas at Houston makes a lot of sense for me. Houston, the surprise team in the NFL. D'Amico Ryans is putting together a great team down there in Texas. He can bring in a nice wide receiver to complement and give his young passer, C.J. Stroud, another guy to throw to. They have a good wide receiving room, but it lacks a little bit of depth here. We saw that with the injuries late in the season. Plugging a guy like Brian Thomas day one in the slot, I think it works out perfectly for the Texans.
I think at 26, Christian Haynes. The Bucs really need to fill out that interior line. And at 27, like you said a minute ago, the Cardinals can really do some damage here. Enos Rackstraw, probably not the most flashiest to pick, but they need cornerback help pretty bad. This is a guy who's an instinctive man corner, like his IQ and his twitch. Certainly a pick I think they'd be very happy with. And obviously the Lions also need to beef up their secondary. So going Kamari Lassiter, who was probably one of the more quiet, impactful performers for the Bulldogs, makes a lot of sense there. Moving to round 2, Nick, this is where things get really fun. PFF, for some reason, has offensive line not listed as a need for the Panthers. They need offensive line help. Tyler Guyton makes a lot of sense. A lot of picks I'm really liking here. Arizona, again, an opportunity to do some damage. Nice athletic pass catcher, Keon Coleman. The two picks I'm really highlighting here, those are the quarterbacks. Nick, Michael Penix to New England. Bo Nix to Minnesota. I think Kirk Cousins should remain in Minnesota. But he's, 35 years old coming off a knee injury. They're going to have to start looking to the future eventually. And I really love Chop Robinson. I think whoever gets him is going to be a steal. Every time I do a mock, I seem to have the Giants landing him. That'd be a phenomenal pick. What do you think about these quarterbacks, though? Do you think these make sense for them to be slotted into, and would they be successful?
Quickly going to touch on Chop Robinson. I think the Giants defense showed a lot of improvements this year. They were really good coming off the edge, but plug another guy in there, a good player, a nice run clogger, a nice player that gets in the backfield, and Chop Robinson can really help out and complement Kayvon Thibodeau, who has had a bit of issues staying consistent. Kind of have 1 week where he's strong, 1 week where he's a bit weak. I do think the two quarterback options here in Penix and Bo Nix are very solid gets in the second round. The Pats, they have a lot of question marks. Obviously, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. Doesn't seem like either of them are quite the future. Penix, obviously the injury concerns are certainly there, which is why he probably falls to the second round in our mock draft, is the injury concerns are certainly not to be overlooked. But you have a new regime in charge up there in New England, Gerard Mayo taking over. Familiar face, but still a new head coach. He might want to grab a quarterback here in Penix who showed a lot of incredible upside at Washington. Bo Nix, another guy who really looked fantastic at Oregon, rejuvenated his career out in Eugene. Him at Minnesota, I think, fits perfectly. Kirk Cousins should get re-signed. I'm imagining the Vikings will do that. He should rehab. He looked pretty fine. He had to take his shirt off, was partying with the fans in the latter half of the season, so it looks like his rehab's going just fine. If you have Cousins leading the way, maybe on a 2-year deal, then you plug Bo Nix in, let him learn a little bit. That could work out great for the Vikings, who do need a lot of help, but I think in the second round, you can kind of take a gamble here at 42 and grab Bo Nix.
And then two picks that are going to be kind of underrated. The Commanders, 36th and 40th overall. Patrick Paul, a guy who's, got some great size. He has length as well at 6'7", 315. He's been a really reliable pass protector. I think that's the right pick for them. And then Braylon Trice, a high-motored player off the edge. Certainly isn't the greatest run defender, but they certainly need some help when it comes to the pass rushing department. Washington, another one of those teams that can quietly make a big impact in the first couple hours of the draft.
Patrick Paul would be a great add for the Commanders as a team. Again, under a new head coach here transitioning, the post-Dan Schneider era. Didn't go great for the Commanders this year, but I think they have a good team, a defense that does need to improve. Adding a guy in Braylon Trice is fantastic. An offensive line that needs to improve. Sam Howell, or whoever the quarterback's going to be, Drake May, Sam Howell. They got hit a lot last year. That was, Howell did. Drake May would equally get hit just as much. You need to keep your quarterback upright, especially if you're going to take the second overall pick. May's going to need to be protected. Grabbing a guy in Paul is a big physical tackle. Works for me.
And then moving to the next selection of picks, 46 through 59. A lot of variety here. You look at the Colts, they pick up a speedy pass catcher, add some more depth to that room. Tez Walker to the Giants. They certainly need help at wide receiver as well. I think this would be a pretty good start to the draft for New York if what we have mocked ends up being true. Mikey Sanders still to the Eagles. This is a very talented secondary. but they just didn't play very good last season. I think you can throw in a guy there who can make a difference in the slot. Back-to-back Michigan players with J.J. McCarthy falling to the Rams at 51. Kind of like Cousins and the Vikings, Stafford still very capable of leading them to success, but he's getting up there in age. You want to do the right thing, like the Packers. Why do they get it right? Because they bring a guy in, let him sit for a couple of years, seamless transition. I think the Rams need to think about that as well. And they've also done such a good job drafting over the past couple of years on day 3. They can afford to take a quarterback here. Do you think JJ will fall this far? As I've seen him potentially cracking the top 10 in most of these mocks.
I think it would work out great if J.J. McCarthy ended up at LA. I don't think he will fall that far. I think a team will take him earlier. Quarterbacks are so important in this league that teams are going to gamble. But that fit in LA makes a lot of sense for me. Stafford has a few good years left, but you can have him on the bench, learn like the Packers do. This team has been very good at drafting late. They haven't had a lot of first-round picks or second-round picks for that matter, but they continue to nail their day 3 picks. Sean McVay is kind of a genius and a wizard with that. I think he'd love to get a guy like McCarthy at 51. A lot of upside there, really nice value with that pick potentially.
I think 54 ball to the Eagles as well. T'Vondre Sweat and those defensive lines, still very talented, but they were starting to show a little bit of a lack of depth there on the interior. They weren't as polished against the run, and that certainly led to the secondary having some issues. Disappointing performance from the Eagles defense overall. And then the last 4 picks of this selection, you see a run on defensive linemen, especially on edge defenders. Chris Braswell, Adiza Isaac, some really good players there. Tampa Bay and Green Bay, 2 teams that certainly want to continue to beef up their defenses. How do you feel about that run there at the end of this section?
I think Braswell makes a lot of sense for the Packers, a guy that showed a lot of improvement at Alabama, looked good under the new defensive coordinator. Kevin Steele was only there for 1 year. Braswell was good. I think Jonah Ellis, underrated player coming out of Utah. He's got high speed, really solid in the backfield. That would work out for a Texans team that is really solid and starting to round themselves out. Adding another piece to complement Will Anderson really does make a lot of sense for me.
And then looking at the back couple picks of this second round, Kalen Bullock, the Bills, they're looking to, I think, upgrade the safety position eventually. This is a good ball hawk, certainly struggled at times for SC, but with the coaching that the Bills and Sean McDermott provide, I think he can be a really good player for them. Another cornerback here for the Lions. They've done such a good job with this roster. The one thing that's really plaguing them is that secondary. And Kalen King and Kamari Laster, I think, will go a long way in upgrading them in that regard. Javon Bullard just seems to be like a typical Ravens player. He can play in the slot, can play at safety, very technically sound. He was a leader for the Bulldogs. I think that'd be a great pick for them. And then the 2 Super Bowl counterparts, Kalen Carlson, Dwayne Carter, both of them going defense. I think the 49ers could use some more depth at the cornerback position. D-line isn't that big of a need for the Chiefs, but you can never go wrong when it comes to beefing up the middle of your defense. I think there's going to be some good picks overall, especially the 3 defensive backs.
I think this is an interesting back half here, these last couple of picks here. The Lions, dare I say, America's team. The Darlings came out this year. The secondary was a bit of an issue. Kalen King at 61 is good value. Penn State has produced some really solid secondary pieces the last couple of seasons. They seem to be able to develop solid defensive backs up there in Happy Valley. Plug King in there. I think it makes a lot of sense as a young Lions team, adding another young, really good, hard-hitting cornerback. Makes a lot of sense for me. I alluded earlier that Chiefs have been kind of nailing their draft picks the last couple of years. Some really solid pieces. Karlaftis was one of them. Adding a guy like Dwayne Carter, I think a very high upside player. We saw some nice production at Duke. Also had some interesting issues at times, but I think he's a player that is so talented. At 64, the Chiefs, you really don't have to add a lot to this team. This Chiefs team is very good. Obviously, they just went back-to-back winning Super Bowls. But you plug in a guy like Dwayne Carter, let him learn, get some reps behind. Makes a lot of sense for me to get some good experience. He's a really good player. Could be a nice high upside project for the Chiefs.
This is certainly a very fun mock draft to do. A nice 2-rounder here. Certainly plenty of variety and some picks that we like more than others. But I think overall, some of the things we nailed, kind of the teams that have the most picks, guys like the Eagles, the Commanders, the Giants. I enjoy doing those teams. I think if they could listen to some of the stuff we're doing, those teams could instantly really boost, their candidacy for making the playoffs.
I think it would be fantastic if the Giants could get a draft like this. It would be a great ad. The Commanders as well, potential. The Cardinals, a team that I love what we've done with them. I think they're very close to figuring it out there in the desert. That team could be very competitive very soon if they have a nice draft this year.
That'll be it for today's episode, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me. We'll do a few more of these before draft time, but it's certainly amping up, and this is a very exciting part of the offseason.
My favorite part of the offseason. Love the NFL draft. Love doing mock drafts. I think we put together a nice 2-rounder here.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Oh, so